They never expected what was coming. They thought it was just another family dispute, something small and petty, something they could sweep under the rug like so many things before. But they were wrong, so very wrong. My name is Daniel Carter, and this is my story. The story of how my own daughter, the person I trusted most in this world, decided I was a problem to be discarded, an obstacle in her way. It's a story of betrayal, of silence, and of a quiet revenge that no one saw coming. It started innocently enough, or so I thought. After my wife passed, I moved in with my daughter and her family. The house was always meant to be my sanctuary, my place of rest in my old age. I believed my daughter cared for me, that she wanted me around, that I was family. But as days turned to weeks, the truth began to show itself in small, subtle ways. Invitations to dinner became less frequent, conversations grew colder, and I noticed glances exchanged behind my back, glances filled with impatience and discomfort. One afternoon, while sitting alone in the living room, I heard a phone ring from the kitchen. It was my daughter's phone. She had forgotten to hang up after a call. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the words struck me like a hammer. He has to go to a nursing home. The silence that followed those words was louder than any scream. I sat still, my heart pounding with disbelief and pain. She was talking about me, her own father, the man who had raised her, loved her, and sacrificed for her. And yet, here she was, plotting to send me away as if I were a burden. Days passed. I said nothing. I watched as they made plans, spoke in hushed tones, and packed boxes, not mine, but hers. Then came the day when they sold the house. The very house I had called home. They didn't tell me, they didn't ask me. They sold it for $890,000. They left for a business trip, smiles on their faces, believing everything was as they wished, believing I was powerless, forgotten, and gone. But when they returned, the smiles faded. The key that once fit perfectly into the front door no longer turned. It was as if the house itself was rejecting them. And on the doorstep there was a note that they never expected to see, words that pierced through their false comfort and exposed their cruelty. When they read the note, they started screaming. That note was my silent voice, my final statement. It was the moment they realized that I had not vanished, that I had taken control when they thought I was helpless. This is my story, a story not just about betrayal, but about reclaiming dignity and standing tall when the world tries to cast you aside. And as I tell it, I want you to understand what it means to be forgotten by those you love, and what happens when you refuse to be forgotten. They screamed because they didn't expect the truth to hit them like a tidal wave. The note I left on the doorstep wasn't just words on paper. It was a declaration, a testament to the life I had lived and the fight I was still willing to wage. I wrote every detail they tried to hide, every secret conversation, every whispered plan to push me aside like an old piece of furniture no one wanted any more. You see, I wasn't just some forgotten old man. I was a man who had watched his family slowly turn their backs on him, who had sacrificed everything to give his daughter a better life, only to be treated like a stranger in his own home. That note was my voice, loud and clear, reminding them of the price of their betrayal. I remember the exact moment I wrote it. Late at night, sitting at the kitchen table with a single lamp casting long shadows, I poured my heart onto the paper. I told them about the nights I stayed awake worrying about them, about the years I worked 2 jobs just to pay for their college, about the times I put their needs before my own, even when my body was tired and my spirit worn thin. But most importantly, I told them I was done being silent. When they found out I had sold the house, their shock was palpable. It wasn't just about losing a building, it was about losing control. That house wasn't theirs to sell. It was mine too, by right and by blood. Yet they had moved forward without me, making decisions in shadows, assuming I would disappear quietly into the background. But I surprised them. I took back what they tried to steal. My dignity, my respect, my story. And I did it without confrontation, without bitterness in my voice, just a steady, unwavering resolve that said, I am still here. That moment, the scream, the shock was the beginning of their reckoning. They realized that their plans to sideline me had backfired in the worst possible way. And as I tell you this, I want you to feel what I felt, the sting of betrayal, the coldness of rejection, and then the burning fire of reclaiming your own life when everyone else has given up on you. But this isn't just about me. It's about anyone who has ever felt forgotten, overlooked, or cast aside by those they love most. It's about standing tall, even when the world tells you to sit down and be quiet. So listen closely. Because the story is far from over. They never saw it coming, not the way I quietly slipped through their fingers, not the way I turned their world upside down with a single stroke of a pen. You see, selling that house wasn't just about taking back what they thought they had lost. It was about reclaiming my power, my identity. For years, I had been pushed aside like an unwanted shadow, an inconvenient truth they hoped to bury deep and never speak of again. But that night, as I signed the papers, I felt something stir inside me, a fierce flame that no amount of neglect could extinguish. It was the flame of a man who refused to be erased, who refused to become invisible just because the world deemed him too old or too weak. And in that moment, every insult, every whispered word behind my back, every cold glance was transformed into fuel. When they came home and found the note, their smiles disappeared instantly. They expected an empty house, a forgotten relic, but instead they were met with a message that cut deeper than any argument ever could. The words on that paper weren't just mine, they were the truth they tried to ignore. I told them how they had underestimated me, how their plan to shove me into a nursing home was not going to work. I described how I had watched their smiles hide cruelty, how every kind word was laced with impatience. I told them I was not a man who could be thrown away like yesterday's trash. I was a father, a man with pride, a man who still had a story to tell. Their screams echoed through the neighborhood, but it wasn't just anger. It was fear. Fear that the man they tried to discard had risen stronger than ever. Fear that the family they thought they controlled was slipping through their fingers. But this story isn't about vengeance alone. It's about dignity, about standing up when you are pushed down, about the quiet strength that grows in the depths of betrayal, about finding your voice when everyone else tries to silence you. And believe me, that strength wasn't born overnight. It was forged in lonely nights, in silent tears, in moments when I questioned whether I still mattered. But I did. And so do you, if you've ever felt forgotten or unwanted. So as you hear my voice telling this story, remember this, even when the people closest to you turn away, even when the walls close in and the world seems cold, you have within you a fire no one can take away. You just have to find the courage to let it burn bright. I want you to feel the weight of those lonely nights, the ones nobody saw, the ones where the silence was so loud it threatened to swallow me whole. After they made their decision, after they whispered about nursing homes and quietly arranged the sale, I found myself alone in a world that suddenly felt cold and empty. The house, once filled with laughter and memories, became a place of echoes and shadows. There were moments I caught myself staring out the window for hours, watching life go by as if I were invisible. The very people who once called me Dad acted as if I had vanished overnight. But inside, a storm was brewing, a mix of pain, anger, and a desperate need to reclaim what was rightfully mine. You see, aging doesn't mean losing your worth. It doesn't mean you become a burden or a shadow, and it certainly doesn't mean your story ends quietly with a good bye no one hears. Every wrinkle on my face held a chapter of love, sacrifice, and hard work. Every gray hair was a testament to battles fought and won, lessons learned, and wisdom earned. I remembered the times I put their needs before mine, the extra shifts I worked to put food on the table, the sacrifices I made so my daughter could go to college, the nights I stayed up worrying about their futures. I remembered the pride I felt watching her grow, the joy of her first steps, the tears shed at her graduations. And yet here I was, discarded like an old coat. But that night, something inside me changed. I realized I wasn't going to wait for their pity or forgiveness. I would take control. I would make my own path. That's when I made the decision to sell the house, not out of spite, but out of a need to reclaim my dignity. The house wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was a symbol of everything they tried to deny me. By selling it, I was sending a message. I am still here. I am still strong. When they came home to a locked door and that note on the porch, their world shifted. They realized they couldn't erase me with silence or distance. I had taken back my story, and in doing so, I had taken back my life. But this story is more than just one man's revenge. It's about the fight we all face when the people we love forget our worth. It's about finding strength in the face of abandonment, about standing tall when everything seems lost. If you've ever felt forgotten, overlooked, or pushed aside, know this: your story isn't over. Your voice matters. Your fight matters, and sometimes reclaiming your dignity means breaking the silence and letting the world hear your truth. They say time heals all wounds, but some wounds just run too deep. In the weeks that followed, as I watched from the sidelines, the silence between us grew heavier, thick with unspoken truths and regrets. My daughter and her family moved on, living their lives as if I had simply vanished. But I was still here, watching, waiting, gathering the strength to rewrite the ending they thought was already written. I remember the ache in my chest every morning when I woke up alone, the bitter taste of betrayal lingering on my tongue. It wasn't just about the house anymore. It was about the loss of trust, the breaking of bonds that should have been unbreakable. I thought family meant forever. I was wrong, or at least I had been. But that pain sparked something else, a determination so fierce it burned away the despair. I refused to be a victim. I refused to be erased. That house, that symbol of my life and memories, was now a weapon in my silent fight for respect and justice. Every day I crafted my plan carefully, knowing that revenge isn't about anger, it's about reclaiming control. I watched them live in the home that once belonged to me, knowing that soon they'd realize it was never truly theirs. The note I left wasn't just a message, it was a mirror reflecting their cruelty back at them. And when they screamed, it wasn't just shock. It was the shattering of their illusion, the collapse of the narrative they'd built around me being weak and powerless. That moment marked the beginning of a reckoning that no one in our family could ignore. But here's the truth no one talks about. Revenge is not the end. It's a beginning. The beginning of healing, of standing tall when everyone else tries to push you down. It's the moment you decide that your story still matters, that your voice is louder than the silence forced upon you. I'm telling you this because if you've ever been betrayed by those you love, if you've ever felt forgotten or cast aside, you're not alone. There is power in pain, and there is strength in survival. So listen to my story and know this: no matter how dark the night, the dawn is coming. And when it does, you'll stand taller than ever before. The days after that note appeared on the doorstep were filled with tension, whispers, and stolen glances. My daughter and her family didn't just lose a house, they lost their sense of certainty, the comfortable control they once held over me. The silence between us was no longer peaceful. It was charged with something raw and real, something that neither side could ignore. At first, I didn't want to see them, but curiosity gnawed at me. I wanted to know how they would face what I had done. Would they come to understand the pain behind my actions, or would they just retreat further into anger and blame? The answer surprised me. There were tears, not just from them, but from me too. I realized that beneath the bitterness and betrayal there was still love, twisted, wounded, but real. My daughter, the same girl who once called me Dad, with a smile, now stood before me, broken and confused. She didn't know how to ask for forgiveness, and I didn't know how to offer it fully. We sat together, the words heavy between us, the past unraveling and the future uncertain. I told her about the loneliness I felt, the nights I lay awake wondering if I had failed as a father. She told me about her fears, her struggles to balance family, work, and her own pain. In that fragile moment, something shifted. It wasn't a perfect healing, no story like this ever is. But it was a start to rebuilding trust, to understanding each other's pain, and to finding a way forward that honored both of us. Because sometimes the hardest battles lead to the deepest connections. Sometimes losing everything means finding something far greater: redemption, forgiveness, and a renewed sense of family. So, if you're listening and feeling broken, remember this. The path to healing is never easy, but it's always possible. And no matter what storms you face, there's a light waiting for you on the other side. Time stretched on, but that fragile moment we shared became a turning point, a crack in the wall of silence and bitterness that had grown between us. I could see in my daughter's eyes a flicker of something I hadn't seen in a long time: remorse, maybe even a glimmer of hope. And in that flicker, I found the courage to let go of some of the hurt I'd been holding on to for so long. Rebuilding wasn't easy. Every conversation was a delicate dance around old wounds and fresh pain. There were days when the anger bubbled back up, when the silence returned, thicker and colder than ever. But there were also days of laughter, small moments of connection, and the slow, steady rebuilding of a bridge that once seemed broken beyond repair. We started talking more honestly, sharing stories from the past, opening doors that had long been locked. I told her about my fears of becoming invisible, of being tossed aside like something no longer useful. She told me about the pressure she felt to manage her life and family, and how overwhelmed she'd been by everything. Though I didn't expect that to excuse her actions, it helped me understand. I realized that sometimes pain makes people do things they never truly mean. Sometimes fear hides behind the coldest words. And sometimes love is buried so deep it's hard to find, but it's still there, waiting. The house may have been sold, but what we rebuilt went far beyond walls and keys. It was about reclaiming trust, forgiveness, and family. About learning that even when people hurt you, they might still need you too. This story isn't just mine, it's for anyone who's ever been pushed away by those they love, who's ever felt alone in a crowd, or forgotten in a family. It's for the broken, the betrayed, and the hopeful alike. If you're listening now, know this. Even when you think your story is over, it's not. Healing is messy, slow, and painful, but it's real, and it's worth fighting for. There's a quiet power in forgiveness, not the kind that erases the past or pretends the pain never existed, but the kind that frees you from carrying that weight every day. As my daughter and I worked through the tangled web of hurt and disappointment, I learned that forgiveness is not a gift you give someone else. It's a gift you give yourself. It's the moment you decide to step out of the shadows of bitterness and reclaim your peace. We began to rebuild our relationship slowly, like mending a fragile vase piece by piece, knowing it would never be perfect again but could still hold beauty. Our conversations deepened, no longer just surface words, but raw, honest exchanges that peeled back the layers of pride and fear. We talked about what had broken us and what could bring us back together. I told her that what hurt most wasn't the thought of going to a nursing home or losing the house. It was the feeling that she didn't want me anymore. That's a pain no money can heal. She confessed that she felt overwhelmed by responsibilities and scared of losing control, and in her fear, she made choices that hurt us both. Through those moments, I realized something important. Family isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. It's about vulnerability, admitting mistakes, and choosing to love despite them. As we navigated this fragile path, the house became a symbol, not of loss or betrayal, but of new beginnings. Though the walls that once sheltered my memories were gone, the memories themselves and the bonds we fought to repair remained strong. If you've ever felt abandoned, forgotten, or pushed away by those you love, remember this: your worth is not tied to a place, a title, or someone else's approval. It's in your heart, your story, and your resilience. And sometimes the greatest revenge is the courage to forgive, to heal, and to move forward with grace. There were days when I still felt the sting of loneliness, the echo of that forgotten phone call ringing in my ears. Those moments would catch me off guard, when I'd look at an empty chair at the dinner table, or pass the old familiar places where laughter once filled the air. It's funny how absence can be so loud, how silence can carry a weight heavier than any argument. But slowly, as time went on, those moments began to lose their sharp edge. I started to find peace not in forgetting, but in accepting. Accepting that people are imperfect, that love sometimes falters, and that pain is part of the human experience. I realized that clinging to resentment only chained me to the past. Forgiveness wasn't about letting them off the hook. It was about freeing myself. In the quiet hours of the night, I found a new purpose, sharing my story so others wouldn't feel so alone. So many people live in the shadow of family betrayal, afraid to speak up, carrying wounds no one sees. I wanted to shine a light on that pain, to tell others that it's okay to hurt, but it's not okay to stay broken. I began writing letters I never sent, pouring my thoughts and feelings onto paper. I found solace in memories, not the painful ones, but the moments of joy, the lessons learned, and the strength built over a lifetime. I found a way to honor my past without letting it define me, and that's when I understood my story is not just about a house or a broken family. It's about resilience, about the human spirit's incredible capacity to endure, to rise, and to heal. It's about reclaiming your life when everything else seems lost. If you're listening and carrying a heavy heart, know this: there is hope. There is light beyond the darkness. You are stronger than you think, and your story isn't finished yet. The healing wasn't linear. Some days, the old wounds flared up unexpectedly, triggered by a smell, a song, or a passing stranger who reminded me of a time when things were simpler. Those days were hard. The weight of disappointment settled back on my shoulders, and I had to remind myself that progress isn't a straight line. It's a winding road filled with setbacks and small victories, but through those struggles, I learned to be patient with myself, to allow the pain to exist without letting it consume me, to hold space for grief without letting it define my identity. And slowly, I began to rediscover parts of myself I thought I'd lost: joy, hope, and even love. I reached out to old friends I'd lost touch with over the years, people who knew me before the pain, who reminded me of who I truly was. Those reconnections became lifelines, proof that I wasn't alone, that my worth extended beyond family ties and past mistakes. I also found new ways to give back, to help others who were struggling with their own stories of betrayal and loss. Through support groups and volunteering, I discovered that sharing my journey not only helped others, but also helped me heal. There was power in vulnerability, strength in honesty, and freedom in connection. Looking back, I see that selling the house was not just an act of revenge, but a turning point, a moment when I stopped waiting for others to value me and started valuing myself. It was the first step toward reclaiming my life, my story, and my peace. If you've ever felt forgotten, discarded, or unloved, know this: your story matters. Your pain is real, but it does not have to be your prison. Healing is possible, and it begins with you. So stand tall, speak your truth, and never forget that even in the darkest moments, there is a spark waiting to ignite a new beginning. As the years rolled on, I came to understand that life's true test isn't about how hard we fall, but about how we rise again. The road back to peace and purpose was never easy, but every step forward reminded me that strength isn't just physical. It's deeply emotional and spiritual. It's about facing your pain head on, embracing your scars, and choosing to move forward with courage. I found solace in simple things: a walk in the park, a kind word from a stranger, the warmth of the morning sun. These small moments stitched my heart back together, piece by piece. I learned to celebrate progress, no matter how small, and to be gentle with myself when the past threatened to pull me down again. In time, my relationship with my daughter began to transform. The barriers we built started to crumble as we opened our hearts to honest conversations and true understanding. We didn't erase the past, but we learned to carry it differently, less as a weight and more as a lesson. We found ways to support each other, even when it was difficult. I saw her struggle with guilt and regret, and I offered her grace. And in that grace, we both found healing. Through this journey, I realized that revenge might burn bright and loud, but it is forgiveness and reconciliation that bring lasting peace. Not because you forget the hurt, but because you choose to release its hold on you. So, if you're carrying a heavy burden, feeling betrayed or abandoned, remember that your story isn't over. You have the power to rewrite the ending, not through anger or bitterness, but through resilience, compassion, and love. My name is Daniel Carter, and this is not just a story of loss and betrayal. It's a story of hope, healing, and the unbreakable strength of the human spirit. There were moments when the past crept in uninvited, stirring up old wounds and doubts, days when I questioned whether all the effort to rebuild was worth it, whether the pain would ever truly fade. But then, in those quiet moments, I reminded myself of how far I'd come, the battles I'd fought silently, the strength I'd discovered deep within. I began to understand that healing is not a destination, but a journey, one marked by small steps forward, occasional setbacks, and the continual choice to keep moving. I learned to honor my feelings without letting them control me, to hold my anger and my forgiveness side by side without confusion. My daughter and I didn't become perfect overnight. We stumbled, we faltered, but slowly, the spaces between us filled with understanding and respect. We rebuilt a relationship that had been fractured, not by erasing the past, but by facing it together. The house, once a symbol of betrayal and loss, became a distant memory, a chapter closed. What remained was the bond we nurtured afterward, fragile but real, a testament to the power of second chances. If you're listening, know this: your story matters. Your pain is valid, your struggle's real, but within you lies the strength to overcome, to forgive, and to heal. No matter how dark the night, the dawn always comes, and with it, the promise of new beginnings. They say every ending is just a new beginning, and as I stand here today, looking back on the journey that nearly broke me, but didn't, I can say with certainty that truth has never felt so real. Losing a home, losing trust, even feeling lost in the family I once called mine was painful beyond words. But from that pain, I found something more powerful, myself. I am not just a man who was forgotten. I am a man who refused to be erased. I am a father who, despite betrayal, chose the path of dignity over bitterness, forgiveness over rage. I am a soul who learned that real strength lies not in revenge, but in the courage to heal and the grace to rebuild. To anyone out there feeling abandoned, betrayed, or broken, hear me when I say this: your story is not over. The darkness you face today does not define the light you are capable of becoming. You have the power to rise, to reclaim your life, and to write a new chapter filled with hope, resilience, and love. This is my story, a story of loss, pain, silent battles, and quiet victories, but above all, a story of redemption and the unbreakable spirit that lives inside us all. Thank you for listening.